Oh hey man, and welcome to my guide for the Gauntlet and the Corrupted Gauntlet. We will be focusing primarily on the Corrupted Gauntlet, as I feel like that's the area where more people need help. This will not be structured as a traditional guide, but more like a guided run. I'm going to show you exactly how I approach the Gauntlet. I believe this will be a very helpful video for both total beginners, as well as folks like myself who had an idea of what they were doing, but struggled to get consistent kills. Despite what scrub-ass Reddit nerds would want you to believe, the Gauntlet is not impossible, and it is a skill issue. I'm not making this video because I feel like I know it all, but I am making this video because I think that my experience is relatable. I sat there banging my head against the wall for far too long before I finally asked for help, and somebody slowed this thing down for me and showed me the ropes. So come and join me on a Corrupted Gauntlet run. We will stop along the way so I can point a few things out, but that's truly all this is going to be. If you're an Iron Man, you can and you will get that seed. If you're a main account, first of all, fuck you. Just kidding. But let's go get that bag. There's technically only one requirement for the Gauntlet, but it's quite a rabbit hole. You actually need to complete Song of the Elves. Well, hey man, that doesn't sound too bad. You are absolutely right, but flying across the screen now is all of the quests that are required in order to do Song of the Elves. So get questing. On top of that, in order to do the quest, you're going to need level 70 in agility, construction, herblore, farming, hunter, mining, smithing, and woodcutting. Maybe the real gauntlet is the requirements you have to meet along the way. Once you got all that, come on down to Prif, man, and let's talk about the recommendations. The wiki wants you to have base 85 combats, which I would say is probably correct. The main things, though, are high hit points, 85 or higher, range and magic, definitely, and rigor and augury, you don't need them, man. You just don't need them. If your stats look anything like mine, you are well above the minimum. Alright, I bet you're ready to get started. Let's go on a run together. Whoa, hold on there, champ. Before we go anywhere, let's take care of some housekeeping. First of all, the only plugin I use is called The Gauntlet. That's what creates the interface in the upper left-hand corner that is actually tracking how many resources I need for my run. I like to split up my prep phase into 2 laps. During lap 1, where we are now, our only job is to achieve all of the resources. That's going to be 7 ore, 7 bark, 7 cotton, 3 herbs, and 1 weapon frame. Alright, so now we just start opening up random rooms, right? Wrong. Even though it's randomly generated, there is a route we can follow. The Gauntlet has its own map. Once you get comfortable, you won't use it during your run, but let's take a peek at it. On the map, we are the person icon directly in the middle. In the room above us is the Hunleff. Our job is going to be to make our way all around the Hunleff room. You are going to feel like you're pressed for time. I promise you, you are not. With some small exceptions that we'll talk about, we're only picking up resources that are directly in front of us, and the only combat we are engaging in is to get our weapon frame. I've zoomed out of the map just so you can see the whole thing. This is just a random map from a run that I did recently, and as you can see, I deviated from this route a little bit, but like I said, there are some small exceptions. You will have to stray off path, and you will have to improvise, but we will talk about the smart ways to do that as we go along. It can be very easy to fail prep because you got sidetracked and wasted too much time, or you explored rooms that just simply don't contain resources. So for that reason, we establish a route and we stick to the plan. We've got one job: get all of the resources and a weapon frame and get back to home base. Alright, you eager beaver, take my hand and let's get going. Now you might be wondering, why didn't you get the fish? I should slap you and tell you to fucking pay attention, because all we're doing is getting the resources and getting back to home base. So we scooped up 1 herb and now we're mining. If you look closely here, as I see the XP drops from mining the ore, I'm actually hitting the rat in between. This saves a ton of time. If you're still looking for a weapon frame and you're in a room of resources, this is a great way to save time. So we actually got very lucky there, and a room with 1 weak enemy dropped a weapon frame. That will usually not be the case. You will often come across a room that has 3 of the weaker enemies in it. So some combination of bats and rats. A lot of the time, you will have to kill all 3 to get a weapon frame, so if resources are available, save yourself some time and use that tip. Now, right away you might be thinking, hey, wait a minute, bucko. You told me to stay on the route, but you're not on the route. What's the big idea? Now, Junior, I'm doing what we call improvising. Let me pull out the handy dandy map and I'll set you straight faster than you can say tuna potato. You see, sport, the route is really just a square. That's all it is, a square that we make around the Hunleff. The reason being, those rooms have the best chance to spawn the core resources, ore, bark, and cotton. And these are the most important things on lap number 1. Now, settle down. You are allowed to leave the route as long as we don't end up touching the outer ring of the gauntlet or finding the wall. We do not want to find a wall on lap number 1. So on our example map, we start south of Hunleff, which means if we choose to go south of the prep room, that's okay. But if we go south again, that's not where we want to be. That's the wall. Instead, if we choose to go south, we should then go east or west and then head north in order to get back on our route. From there, we just continue north until we can make our way around Hunleff and then eventually back to the prep room. Great job so far. I think I could trust you to improvise at least a couple more times. Now, I know what you're thinking. Gee willikers, Zuck. I'd love to improvise. When should I do that? All right, Tiger, since you've got such a great attitude, I'll tell you. There's our red square, the route, and the rooms we're going to be looking at are any of the ones directly outside of the route. It's not the end of the world if you accidentally wander too far, but you are straying further away from where we want to end up, which is back at the prep room. The other thing that can happen is you can accidentally wander into a mini boss room, and if you're not expecting it and you're hit off prayer, they can slap you pretty hard. More on the mini bosses later. All right, Buster, back to business. Let's establish where the fuck we are since everything's red and it all looks exactly the same. Our prep room was north of Hunleff. The first room we chose to enter was north of the prep room. For that reason, I know if I go north again, either in this room with the cotton or in the room to my right with the fish, we will hit the wall. Remember, we don't want to hit the wall. So if we can't go north and we know we want to go around Hunleff, the logical conclusion would be, fucking go south, man. So, looking at the available resources, the smart thing to do would be gather the cotton from the north side, and then make the last one, the 7th one, the one we need at the bottom here. I'm going to intentionally skip the northwest one, just to demonstrate why you shouldn't double back. We're going to go ahead and peek into this room. This is where we want to go, by the way. And perfect, there's actually cotton there. So you typically don't want to double back because it ends up being a waste of time. If you follow the route and peek in some rooms, you will probably find what you're looking for anyway. I am going to open a few of these rooms to the west just because we're already on this side and we've seen the rooms to the south along the route. See, we do find an herb and a couple of tier 2 enemies, and that's typically all that's really out here, man. These are the improv rooms. We're going to work our way back towards the route, so south and now east towards the Hunleff. If you do improv out here, by the way, and you haven't found a weapon frame yet, if you kill a scorpion, wolf, or unicorn, any of the tier 2 enemies, you are guaranteed a weapon frame, and they also drop more shards. So as you can see here, we're now adjacent to the Hunleff, opposite the prep room, and lo and behold, here's some more resources and ones that we need at that. If I wasn't looking so good on shards or if I still needed a weapon frame, as I mined these ore, I would be attacking the rats, but for the purposes of this video, we're just going to ignore them for now. So continuing on the route, working our way around the Hunleff, we find the last of the resources that we need. At this point, our inventory is getting full, so since we have all the ore, I can drop the pickaxe, and then the pestle and mortar and harpoon, you're going to end up dropping if you find all the resources that you need. As you see here, we get our last bark, I go ahead and drop the axe, and we only have one free inventory space remaining. That's exactly where you want to be, man. This is actually a perfect lap 1. So what now? First of all, give yourself a nice pat on the back. Good job, superstar. Then focus the fuck up, because failing prep sucks. It will happen, it's inevitable, but it's almost always all your fault. That sounds pretty harsh, but trust me, it really is almost always all your fault. Double check your inventory. If you're using the Gauntlet plugin, the first thing to look at is, do I have 3 herbs and do I have 1 weapon frame? If we look at our Gauntlet plugin now, it does gray out the resources as we collect them. Now, herbs, fish, and the weapon frames actually function differently. If you get one of those as a drop from a monster, it will tick down even if you didn't pick it up. For that reason, make sure they're in your inventory. Now, the next thing to look at is the shard count. As you can see here, we have 245. At the end of lap 1, you want to have a minimum of 110 shards. Before we go any further, we're going to cut back to the Gauntlet plugin just for a second. If you look in between the fish and the weapon frame, that's a total shard counter. So you can set that to the total amount of shards you need for tier 1 or tier 2 prep, and it will count it down for you. I don't do that, but if that helps you, go ahead and do it. Once you do enough of the prep, you kind of get to know how much each individual piece costs anyway, and in terms of speed and being able to plan ahead, it's a skill you're going to want to have. But again, if you think that will help you, go ahead and do that. Alright Ace, so what did we need those 110 shards for anyway? Well, we need a tier 2 weapon, I prefer the staff, and that will cost you 80 shards, and we also need 3 vials, costing 10 each or 30 shards in total. If you can make all of those things, then hot dog, you're in business. With any of the extra shards you have, so any shards over 110, you're going to make as many tier 1 armor pieces as you possibly can. The full set costs 120 shards, and they are 40 shards per piece. So in our situation, we can actually make the full set right now, which is great because we'll use up more resources and we won't have to pick them up later. Make as many armor pieces as you can, and then just drop all of your resources, minus the herbs, in front of the singing bowl. Now, this seems like a whole lot, but the more you do this, you will almost instinctively go through this process. For me, it's not even a conscious thought anymore. So alright, Big Cheese, let's head over to the singing bowl and put this into practice. Alright, so we should know what we're doing, so I'm going to fly right through this. I make the staff twice, once for the basic version, again to upgrade it, make all 3 armor pieces and my 3 vials. Drop all of the resources except your herbs. Alright, Scout, at this point we've made it to lap number 2. Give yourself a round of applause, by the way. We're halfway done after all. But don't get too excited too early. We still have a few jobs to do. Job number 1 is upgrading our current tier 2 weapon, the staff, into a tier 3. In addition to that, we also need to acquire a second tier 3 weapon. So it's not always possible to upgrade the tier 2 weapon that you chose arbitrarily. If you're following my method, and nice choice by the way, then you chose the staff. Each weapon gets upgraded by killing a specific mini-boss. Possible mini-bosses include a Corrupted Bear, which drops a spike to upgrade the halberd, the Corrupted Dragon, which drops the orb to upgrade the staff, and the Corrupted Dark Beast, which drops the bowstring to upgrade the bow. So if you're following along with me, then you made the staff, which means obviously it would make things very easy if we encountered the dragon. No, buddy, I'm sorry to tell you, I did mean if. You're not guaranteed to find a dragon on your adventure. The mini-bosses are a little bit of a rabbit hole, but it's definitely worth diving into. To find the mini-bosses, starting at Hunleff, we go out towards the wall in any 4 cardinal directions. That room and the 2 adjacent rooms have a chance to spawn a mini-boss. They will only spawn here, and they will not leave this room. Now, there's a couple of strategies you can employ when chasing your upgrades. For me, I tend to just go with the first 2 mini-bosses that I happen to kill. So, even though I made the staff, if I get a bear and a dark beast, I will enter the final fight with the halberd and the bow. I know a lot of people are a fan of the no bear strategy, where if you find a bear, you just skip it, but I don't really like that because, 1, if you never learn the fight with the halberd, you kind of limit yourself, and if you're ever in a situation where it's use the halberd or fail prep, well, you're kind of screwed. Also, say you're looking for the orb, if you kill the bear and a dark beast, the next mini-boss you find, so the third one, is guaranteed to drop you the upgrade piece that you lack. If you skipped that bear earlier and then the third boss you find is a bear, guess what? That third one is always going to drop you a spike. Unless you're doing great on time, then you do you, man. Alright, Chief, let's set off on lap number 2. First of all, don't be a dumbass like me and forget your harpoon and pestle and mortar. I can't believe you almost let me take off without him, man. It's a good thing I'm running this guide. You want to fill up your vials with water. You can either do it at the well in the prep room, or if you get a situation like mine where there's a fishing spot right here, you can do it on the fishing spot. I will say, if you're looking sketchy on potion supplies, don't chance it, man. Just put the water in the vial in the prep room, especially if you're sitting on herbs. Because if you run out of run energy out here, it is such a pain in the ass on lap number 2. The potions do restore prayer, but they also function as a stamina pot. So a quick note on fishing too, it's really easy to cancel out your animations. So if you're trying to fit extra actions in, make sure you're doing it in between XP drops. At some point when you're feeling comfortable, before you get to a mini boss, ideally, use your pestle and mortar on your shards, create the dust, and then make your potions. So this is all job number 2 and number 3 are, and you can usually do them on your way out to the wall to find the mini boss, or to complete job number 1. To start thinking about inventory space, combine your potions into 2 4-dose potions and 1 1-dose potion. You almost always need to drink 1 dose before lap 2 is complete, and it frees up an inventory space, so it kind of helps you gather 1 more piece of food, or if you miscounted, another upgrade material. So we can kind of see Hunleff in the upper right, and we've made our way out to the wall. So that means the next room to the south and the following room to the south have a chance to spawn a mini boss. This one happens to be a dark beast, so I prayed range and I turned on Mystic Might just to help kind of speed this along. And while you're killing him, you sort of have some chill time, man. You can organize your inventory however you like it, and you're really just waiting for him to go down. So the dark beast, since he's the first boss, is guaranteed to drop the bowstring. It's the one specific to him. They also drop shards and a weapon frame every time. They can drop fish as well as an additional teleport crystal, but mostly you're just worried about the weapon frame and the upgrade material. So since our second mini boss is a dragon, that means we know that we're going to get the orb. For the purposes of this video, it looks like we're going to be going into the final fight with the staff and the bow, which isn't the worst thing at all. At this point, you can drop your scepter, and we just have to evaluate our situation. Great job! Lap number 2 is almost complete. High five, sport! Now it's time for the final checks. Taking a peek at our timer, we have 2 minutes and 11 seconds left, which is plenty of time to complete anything that we have remaining. Sliding over to our inventory, we have both upgrade materials, we have our second weapon frame, and we're doing pretty well on fish. Which and how many mini bosses you find determines your next move at this point. If there was no mini boss in the room that had the dragon, I would definitely open up the next room to the south and hope that we can get a second mini boss. If it was a different mini boss, like a bear, I would probably just commit to using the spike and making 2 weapons for the final fight. If the second mini boss was also a dark beast, he would have a 50-50 chance of dropping us the orb or the spike, and that would kind of influence this decision as well. The last thing to consider is the shards, and this is where things get a little bit complicated. Because everybody's situation at this point will be different, you need to have a little bit of flexibility. This is why I don't really mess with the shard counter with the Gauntlet plugin, because you end up kind of having to work this stuff out for yourself. Let's break down our current situation in regards to shards. To upgrade from tier 1 armor to tier 2, it costs you 60 shards per piece, or 180 shards in total. To upgrade your second weapon, it will cost you 80 shards. Upgrading from a tier 2 to a tier 3 weapon is free. You just need the upgrade material. So in our situation, we need 260 shards in total. Now, your number may vary if you still have a tier 1 armor piece to make. Just add 40 shards per tier 1 armor piece that you still have to make. The other possible scenarios include having 2 upgrade pieces that don't match your current weapon, in which case you're going to have to gather 80 more shards for a total of 340, because you're going to have to make them both from scratch. If you don't find any upgrade pieces, you better scramble to the next possible boss rooms. So since we have our 2 upgrade materials and we know we have 180 shards, the only thing left for us to do is get 80 more shards. I remember that there was a wolf in this room, so I just came back to it. If we were not able to get 2 upgrade pieces, like if that dragon room was empty and then the next room to the south was empty, we'd have to scramble to the wall on a different side of the gauntlet to try and find our mini boss. And he ends up dropping us 105 shards, so that's what I mean. You're able to make it up pretty quickly with the tier 2 enemies. I just used my teleport crystal to come back to the prep room, and step number 1 is to cook all of your fish. While your fish are cooking, either work it out in your head or right-click the pile by the singing bowl to see how many inventory spaces you need for the core resources. For me, I know since we're upgrading just a tier 1 set to a tier 2 set that we need 9 inventory spaces. For the purposes of this video, to show you that there's not a big rush, I just dropped all the fish. So now we just spam click, pick up all of our resources, and we're going to start upgrading. Alright, in the singing bowl, we make 3 tier 2 armor pieces, we upgrade our staff once, and then we create our bow and upgrade it twice. Now it's just a matter of coming back to the fish pile and picking up all of our fish. It's at this point, you want to still have the harpoon in your inventory, unless you're very confident with where you're at, and you can start evaluating if you have time to gather any extra fish to bring into the fight. For me, I'm just going to go in with 20 because I know it's totally doable. I don't like to keep the harpoon in my inventory because I've never done it, but for some reason I have some anxiety of accidentally equipping it or, not paying attention and doing something stupid there. So for that reason, I drop it, but you don't have to. Now, you want to enter the Hunleff room with your Protect from Range prayer on. He does always start by attacking with range, and I'm not going to break down every single detail of this fight. This section is really going to be more focused on strategy. The first thing you need to decide is how you're going to keep track of your prayer switches. There is a plugin called the Hunleff Helper that functions kind of like a metronome, and it gives you auditory cues of when to switch your prayer. I don't use it. Personally, I go by sound. I know for some people, they count in their head. For me, if you're going to follow my method, just listen to the noises, man. He makes a very unique sound when he changes which attack style he's using. When he uses the attack that disables your prayer, first of all, it's a very obvious looking pink ball, but second, there is a unique sound that plays. When it comes to changing your weapons, honestly, I just react to him changing his overhead prayers, but honestly, the more that you do this, you kind of get a feel for it. I know it sounds like a cop-out, but honestly, after a bunch of runs, you will feel it. Alright, so moving forward in the fight, we are ranging, he's protecting from mage, so that's working out pretty nicely here. Accuracy is very hit or miss, so don't get discouraged if you're hitting a bunch of zeros. The main thing that makes this fight consistent is just you taking control of it. So I haven't eaten much food yet, and I'm doing my best to only eat as I'm running away from the tornadoes. I'm comfortable enough at this point to sneak some attacks in, but I never used to, especially early on. It's not absolutely necessary. Just make sure you're avoiding the tornadoes, and at minimum, you're using this opportunity to eat and get your HP to a comfortable level. Keep control of the fight. The first phase of the fight from 1000 HP all the way down to 660. The patterns on the floor are very easy to avoid, so you don't have to be too picky in terms of where you're running to. If you do get low on health before the tornadoes come out, don't be afraid to eat up a little bit. You can't do any damage if you're dead, so that's obviously priority number one. And once the tornadoes come in, you really just rinse and repeat. You try and get as much damage as you possibly can in, but truthfully, it's quite hard to get RNG'd out of this fight. I've only had it happen like one time since I've really had a full grasp on the fight where I felt like just my RNG screwed me over. Like I ran out of supplies. It wasn't that I made a mistake. Very, very rare. So now we're in phase 2 and you'll see the patterns change a little bit. In this phase, it's more important to not run behind Hunleff. You absolutely can, but the damage starts pouring in here and it's easier to get distracted because the tornadoes get a little more challenging as well. And in phase 3, as we'll talk about and you'll see, you really don't want to run behind Hunleff at all, with some very small exceptions. Sometimes it's doable and you can get out of it, but all in all, it's a good habit to be in to just try and stay in the open space. Now, you saw there I got clipped by 3 of the tornadoes and took a lot of damage, but since I was keeping my HP high and taking advantage of being able to basically eat for free as you dodge the tornadoes, I survived it. So hopefully that doesn't come around to screw us and we run out of food, but I guess we'll have to see on that. All right, we're getting very close to the final phase, which is just the last third of his health, but the floor patterns, they can get a little tricky, man. They really can. So we'll slow it down and we'll talk about some strategies to recognize the floor pattern and how to avoid getting stuck in a sticky situation. All right, now that we're getting deep into the floor patterns, let's establish a couple rules. Rule number 1, find an open lane. Now where I'm standing, this is a very convenient example. If I just go in a straight line to the north, I can get all the way to the other end of the arena without any resistance. We always want to find the path that most resembles that same situation. Some of them, there's not a lot of space to work with, but there's always some amount of space. Rule number 2, and this one is less of a rule, but more like some advice. Make sure that that path is away from Hunleff. Rule number 3, and again, you don't have to do this all the time. I don't always do it all the time, but on the western door, I'm going to show you the safe tiles. When you're resting, it's a good idea to be on these, attacking Hunleff and focusing on your prayer, but as long as you are somewhere near them, you won't have to move too much when the floor pattern changes. These tiles are 3 tiles in from the door, and you can apply this to any of the 4 doors. Continuing on, the floor pattern is about to change. There it is. I'm going to head towards the door because I'm on a temporary safe tile, and I'm very close and have access to the permanent safe tiles. Now, this is where things get interesting. I was near the southern door. I identified this pattern as the tornadoes came out, and I moved slightly to my west and found my road to run across the room on. Now, our job is not done. By the time we get across the room, the tornadoes are still going to be active. At this point, my thought process is to get to the tile that I've already clicked, then I will likely run to the east, back to the south, and then work my way west back into the open space where I currently am. The only way that plan is going to change is if the floor pattern changes as I'm dodging the tornadoes. Corrupted Gauntlet does require some quick thinking, but it's honestly not as hard as it looks. Alright, so let's see how I choose to handle this. I run north, the pattern does change, but it changed in a way that allowed me to stick to my plan. Now that I'm back in the open space, I'm just trying to run as far south as I can, and then move around the tornadoes to the north to dodge them. Alright, so now that we're at the rest phase or the DPS phase, I find my permanent safe tile. I honestly don't do this very often, so I'm surprised I did on this run, but I'm just reacting to the floor patterns as they come, finding my lane, waiting for the tornadoes to spawn. So this one's interesting. We don't actually have that much space to work with here, but we do have a 5-tile stretch to the north. As you can see, I've already clicked it. Now, the floor patterns do change pretty quickly at this point, so with a pattern like this and our current location, the goal is to just buy enough time for the pattern to change and then identify the open space. We're just trying to get through these tornadoes and get back on the Hunleff. Whenever you feel pressure like this, stop trying to fit DPS in and make sure that you can survive. It's also worth noting that this pattern always seems to come up when you run around the Hunleff. I've got my tinfoil hat on maybe, but that's the reason you don't run around the Hunleff. So we run away from the Hunleff, respecting the rules, we find the open space, again, more open space away from Hunleff, and we work our way back towards the side of the room that's most friendly to us. We have a lot of space here and we manage to get through the tornadoes. At this point, I should do a better job of finding that permanent safe tile, but again, I'm pretty comfortable here after 400 KC, so I don't really get too picky about where I stand. As long as you're somewhere close to the permanent safe tiles, you will not have to move that far should you have to move. So here I find some open space directly across the middle. This is an example of me getting complacent, and it does work out for me, but again, I'm comfortable with most of the floor patterns, so I do break the rules sometimes. Do as I say, not as I do. This is a great example of what used to get me killed when I didn't have as much experience here. The safer option would be to follow the lane along the west wall and into the corner that's away from Hunleff. You don't necessarily want to be in the corners as you're dodging the tornadoes, but if you're in the corners away from Hunleff, your chances are far greater. So it's not wrong what I choose to do here, but I wouldn't recommend making that a priority. Try to find a safer option. Also, I'm going to continue east, but I could have also just started to run north past that tornado. That would have guaranteed that I wouldn't get stomped and give me a safer space to work with. So here's another great example. Sorry for pausing again. If I panic here and I run south, I'm stuck in the corner behind the Hunleff. There's two floor patterns that could come up that absolutely screw you over if you're in the corner behind the Hunleff. And as I said earlier, it feels like they always come up when you're behind the Hunleff. If you're ever in that situation, run underneath him, take the stomp, just keep your HP high. You have a much better chance of surviving that than the floor damaging you and the tornadoes. Alright, wrapping up the fight here, I kind of overshot my channel there because the floor hadn't quite changed yet, but works out for me. Again, it was a completely avoidable situation. I didn't even have to be in that situation to begin with, and that's kind of the way you want to approach it. So wrapping up, let's go ahead and open up the chest, and something big for the video, not so much. Alright man, well I'd like to say thanks for hopping in with me with this Corrupted Gauntlet run. I hope this video helps you out, and I wish you all the luck at the chest. If you'd like to see more guides from me or more guided runs, please like the video. That way I know this wasn't a total disaster. And any feedback regarding how this was formatted or what you thought of the video would be greatly appreciated in the comments. I've never really done a guide before, so this was an experiment for me on something that I felt good about overcoming, and I just wanted to share what I had learned with you guys. Most of the videos on this channel are an Iron Man progress series that I've been running for about 6 months now, so if you're interested in that, there'll be a playlist linked to this video. And just one more plug. If you are looking for a clan in the game, or a cult, I mean, you know, we've got one, and it's called the Good Zuck. Hit me up in the game, Zuck's brother, or go ahead and join our Discord. Again, will be linked to this video. Peace out, everybody.